At the Create Daily, we know it isn't easy being a storyteller, especially if you've been historically excluded. We also know how much can come between us and getting the work done. That's where the lab comes in. Introducing the Create Daily Lab, our library of courses, workshops, and tools to help you establish a healthy creative practice while prioritizing the things that you can control. The lab is here to help you with your craft, your practice, and your know-how, all in one place. Keep up with the latest happenings at the lab at thecreatedaily.com. That's thecreatedaily.com. It's time to get to work. We are always on the lookout for IP. And again, for us, it doesn't have to be new. And even for the business, what they're looking for is a proof of concept, essentially, right? They are always trying to minimize risk. So here's something that was published. Okay, somebody vetted it, right, is what they're thinking. Yes, a bonus is if it has a huge audience and huge social media and all that. But at the very minimum, this is a proof of concept. Somebody vetted this. I feel more comfortable with this. Child, we did it.
Woo, woo. We're here.
We are here with a whole podcast. A whole podcast. Not half a podcast. A whole podcast.
That's right. 100.
Welcome to the Creative Cut Up Podcast, a lively and honest space for storytellers that sits at the intersection of craft, business, and independence. I'm Felicia Pride, a writer, director, producer, head honey and honey child, and head storyteller of the Create Daily, a platform I founded in 2012 to help storytellers, especially those of us who are historically excluded, thrive creatively and professionally. And I'm here with my co-host because we got some cutting up to do.
We sure do. I'm Dria Rowland, the creative executive at Honey Child and a writer and producer.
Yes, she is.
And I'm Georgette Pierre, a voice actor and producer. You can hear it, right?
Oh, we hear that voice, honey. We hear the voice. So join us weekly where we talk shop and smack and share the good, the bad, and the ugly. And from 3 different perspectives, which I love, providing tangible tips to support your creative practice, your career, and your artist self. Because we all know that being an artist is hard as hell.
Oof, say that.
But the Creative Cut Up is here to help. Shall we begin, ladies?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Hey. Welcome to a new edition of the Creative Cut Up Podcast. So excited to have y'all here. And so as you know, if you've been listening to us or following us, in addition to this Creative Cut Up Podcast and running the Create Daily, we also run an independent production company called Honey Child. And recently we had some really big news in the trades and deadline that we are adapting Tia Williams' New York Times bestselling book, 7 Days in June.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Alongside our partners at Will Packer and Kinetic, and Amazon. Super, super excited. So we thought, you know what? We should do an episode about adapting IP because at Honey Child, we love IP, right? I used to be an author. I used to work in book publishing. So we love books at Honey Child. So we thought, why not do an episode about adapting IP? And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And in addition to this podcast, Dria and I are leading a class for the Create Daily Lab, and it's called Based On How to Adapt Books, Articles, Real Life Stories for Film and TV. Super, super excited about that class. And we'll put the link in the show notes. But also, you can always find our classes at thecreatedaily.com. So just to get into this, Dria is our book maven. That's what I call Dria, okay? And she's our creative exec at Honey Child. Talk a little bit more about how she finds books and all that. But just to get into it, Dria, how did your love for reading come about? How did you become the book maven?
I'm so honored. I love this title. Nobody else can have it. It's a sad ass story, if I'm being honest with you. So when I was a kid, I have a sister who's a year younger than me, and that girl was not messing with me. She did not want to play with me. She was not my friend. So I just read books. Books were my little saving grace. That's where I found myself. That's where I realized I was not alone. And so books are 100% my first love. My parents, we used to live in a neighborhood called Oak Park, and there was a library on the corner. So every Saturday, my parents and my sister and I would walk to the library, and I would just check out stacks of books and read them within that week and have them back. So my love for books started early, and every book I read, I just could see it so vividly. Like I just could see it like a TV show or a movie. And if I couldn't see it like that, then I couldn't stick with it. So I think that the job I have now is genuinely my dream job because I get to read books and say, I see this world. I can see people walking in it, enjoying it, responding to it. We got to do something with it. So that's how it started. And I'm so grateful that it actually took me someplace.
We love that. Yes. We love that. So why don't we start there a little bit then? Why don't we talk a little bit about Honey Chile's process? First of all, sort of our ethos around books and adapting IP, but what is our process of that? So can you talk a little bit about that, Dria?
Absolutely. Well, I will say our process is still in progress. We are building this thing and finding what works and what makes sense. But my main thing is I love books. I am plugged into a bunch of publishing companies, newsletters. I have a lot of friends who are authors. I follow a lot of authors and publishing companies on social media. And so I do try to actually hear about books before they come out or as soon as they come out. And I will tell you what I've learned is that even better than that is having a relationship with managers and agents, because they will tell you before the book is even written that it's coming down the pipeline. So at Honey Chile, it really helps that we have a demographic that we speak to. It really helps that, we know that we're talking to Black women 40 plus and we have an idea of what they like, what we think they will respond to. And so it gives you a filter when you're looking through these book lists, when you're looking through the tweets, when you're seeing authors announce their new projects. I'm able to easily say, this is for my demographic and this might not be for my demographic. And I think that Felicia has done a great job of saying, like, these are the type of stories we want to tell. And so I look for books that align with the stories that we want to tell.
And then from there, there's so many different ways that we try to work with that book, right? So what happens usually to Dria will send, email, check out this book, or our agency, UTA, we're on our, what they call their media rights list, which sends out a list of books. Most of the agencies have book scouts and full book departments, and they send out a list of books that are available or want to be adapted into film and TV, books and articles. And so we'll definitely scan those as well, and Dria will send those along. And then we have to think about strategy, right? So first, we always like, is it available? What's up with this book, right? And then we usually have my manager, Diane, kind of look in, dig in, or reach out about a certain book. So we just know, like, are the rights available? Is the author adapting? Is there a production company attached? We try to think about all those things. And because we are an independent production company, we have to be scrappy. So sometimes what we'll do is, if it's a book that we love, there's a book that we have set up recently at CBS Studios, a book that Dria brought to my attention. I knew the author's sister. Like, I love the author's first book collection. So we went directly to the author through her reps, but we went direct and asked for a shopping agreement, asked for, I think maybe 6 months is all we could get, which meant we will have this book exclusively to shop it around to entities. And in this case, we wanted to shop it around to more established production companies in efforts to get a bite and get it set up someplace. So that's exactly what happened with this particular book. Okay, we have the shopping agreement, which gave us a little bit of skin in the game to then go out to more established production companies. And we went to a whole gamut from Shondaland to Berlanti to Imagine to, just a gamut of production companies, and put together what I was calling a spiel. I was not calling it a full pitch because we wanted to find a partner who also wanted to get in the development stage with us, get creative with us, really position this show in the way that we feel like it could be positioned. But there was different ways that we could go about it. And we wanted a partner to help us really find what's the best route for this particular property. And then we took a bunch of meetings, and our reps set up those meetings. And through those meetings, had those creative conversations. And we're looking for a couple things. One, a production company that had a track record on TV, or a production company that could attract talent or was talent led, or a production company that had a deal somewhere that made sense, right? We ended up partnering with Uzo Aduba's company for this particular project. They have a deal at CBS. So then we took it to CBS with them, and we're able to get that project set up at CBS Studios. So that's one way that we've gone about it is to do it that way. Other ways is if it's a big book, we wait for the big production company to snatch it up. And then we try to go in there and say, hey, we're interested. We would love to be a part of this because we don't have the money to go after the big books, right? So that's another sort of strategy that we use.
Writers come to us directly.
Yes, absolutely. That's also a lot of honeys have been coming to us for sure.
And at that point, it's up to us to kind of say, like, does this fit with our mandates? How much work does it need? What role do we see our company playing in the story? Do we want to help write it? Do we want to be producers? And then what you said earlier about, are they writing it themselves or versus are we writing it? But also, do we think the market has a taste for this book? So we could be so excited about a book. We could really want to work with a honey. We could be big on it, but it's like, do we really think that we can sell it? And we're so honest with writers about, we don't know if we can get this to the next level for you.
Yes.
If it's that case.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love for you to dig in a little bit more because there are different aspects. So if someone wasn't an independent production company, what else goes into locking in IP if it's not necessarily the backing of a studio or your own merits? What's the money piece that comes with that? Some people may have access to be able to lock in IP in a more exclusive way.
I think what Honey Chile has going for us is we have a very clear mission. And we're able to talk to writers in a way that I think makes them feel comfortable. One, I was an author before, so I know what that feels like. And two, we're not going after books typically that we want to change dramatically or drastically. Three, we want the author involved as much as the author wants to be involved. Right. Mm-hmm. And so what we're selling is the experience of their book being adapted is what we're selling. Now, we can put up a nominal shopping agreement fee, but it's so nominal that it's like, So we know we can't get a lot of time. So that's also why we have to be very strategic. It's like, okay, they're going to give us these 6 months for no dollars, right? And we got to work our connections to do that. I also think us having some track record, maybe not in television shows on the air, but a track record in working with authors has helped as well. And then just a track record of my work in TV, and you can see my work if you want to, you know what I mean, has also helped. And I think our reputation has helped. So we're using a lot of the intangibles, I would say, in order to compensate for the lack of the money at this point.
Yeah, that can't be understated. You know, a lot of what we do at Honey Chile is celebrating your first act, your second act, and how it influences what you do now. And so you having that deep understanding of the publishing industry, having those relationships, knowing how it works and being a writer, that makes writers comfortable. And then you know the television business as well. So that makes them twice as comfortable. So you have that comfortability that I'm talking to somebody who understands how important my story is and they understand how this process works that I don't know how it works. So there's just a level of trust that we're able to offer that is just as valuable or, you know, additive to money.
And also we have a track record in that we have an understanding of what is going to work in film or TV. And we have not never set up a project somewhere, right?
Yeah.
That's based on IP. We have been able to set up every single piece of IP that we have secured or had shopping agreements for.
Some people may think that one form of IP may be easier to adapt than the other. I'm curious on both of your thoughts about that. Like a Twitter thread, right? We know that movie Zola came out based off of a Twitter thread, right? We know there's articles that get adapted. We know there's books, podcasts, but I'm just kind of curious if it's really based off of the form of IP that makes it easily adaptable, or if that's, you know, just a facade, or if it's literally what the market is calling for at that moment.
Are you a comedy enthusiast or an inspiring writer with a story to tell? How about a seasoned writer looking to explore a new genre? Then our Crafting Comedy Writing for TV class is for you. Taught by award-winning writer, producer, and stand-up comedian Roche Jeffrey. Roche is a multi-hyphenate with credits that include Golden Globe-nominated comedy series Smilf, Woke, Grownish, and a recent NAACP award-winning narrative podcast, Yes We Cannabis, on Audible. In this multi-week television writing course, she'll teach you how to develop compelling narratives, engaging characters, turn your initial concept into a polished outline, develop and hone your comedic voice, while also delving into the intricacies of comedy writing. Bring your comedic vision to life with a seasoned, award-winning writer and stand-up comedian in this multi-week comedy writing class. And when you join the We Create Daily community, powered by Patreon, you'll get 10% off the course for a limited time. So sign up for this amazing course today at thecreatedaily.com. That's thecreatedaily.com. Child, it ain't easier. I do think sometimes a book can be a little bit easier because for what I have found is for dialogue. When a book is well written, I would just be copying right into final draft. You know what I mean? Because it's like, this dialogue is fucking good. I don't need to recreate it. And, for major plot points, of course, but the thing with TV is you have to make it propulsive, right? So we may love a world, but if we can't figure out a way to make it propulsive, we can't do it. But currently at Honey Child, we have projects or I've worked on projects that have been in like the 3 major IP areas, right? So books, right? We have 3 or 4 books now set up at different places. Probably 4 or 5 actually. And what we look for in books they don't have to be new, but we look for a world that we have not seen or that's really interesting, characters that are really interesting. And again, something that we know can have that propulsive nature to it, or that we can add that propulsive element. And then we have a project that is based on life rights. And I've done a couple of life rights projects. I would say that life rights is very sticky. People like to sue. If the life rights people are still around, they really, they get very precious about it. And you have to be like, this ain't you. You know what I mean? We ain't doing a documentary. But they cannot sort of separate themselves from the characters, which can become creatively challenging. So life rights to me is a little difficult. We'll talk more in detail in the class for sure about securing life rights and what that looks like. It's a very similar sort of contractual agreement as the rights to a book, but it just is more tricky just dealing with the actual life rights holders. And then Article recently wrote a feature based on an article, and though the producers procured the rights to that article, I did not. I was brought on to write it. And often with articles, I'm like, you don't need to get the IP for the article. But in this case, it was so specific. So it made sense for them to go after the article. And it was such a great jumping off point, but it didn't have no plot. You know what I mean? Like, it was about the world, but then I have to come up with the plot and the characters and dramatize it. It just was, this is what this world is, but I have to then flesh out the world and the characters and all of that. So I think creatively, books may be easiest, but they all have their unique challenges.
And I would say from the network side, what I've seen, studio side, books are interesting because you imagine they have a built-in world that you can do a series, 2 or 3. So you're not just investing in a one-off, you're investing in a franchise, which is what all the studios want. And then it comes with an audience. It comes with people who are familiar with this work, this rabid fan base. Hopefully the author has a following on social media. And so you're buying into the story and also the fans they come with in that following. And that's why it's so hard, I would say, for writers who aren't popping on social media, because people we kind of want you to do half the work and bring that audience with you. But regardless, books are attractive for those reasons.
And I think that's where a Honey Child comes in, because we don't look at the writer's social media as a component of our decision making. If we love the book, we come with our own social media. We come with our own benefits and add-ons. So we don't have to consider that when we're going after books.
Well, speaking of books, 7 Days in June. Fucking love this book. Announcement was made for someone on outside looking in, with Honey Child being this independent production company. What was the process to even get to the point of getting it to the development stage, right? Because we see the thing, we hear the thing, we're like, oh, great. What happens next?
This was a project that came to me because I had worked previously with Will Packer on the film side of things. Actually, I worked on Will Packer on the TV side too. The first pilot I ever sold was with Will Packer. It was based on one of my favorite books in the whole wide world called Third Girl from the Left by Martha Southgate. Mm-hmm. We sold that to Bravo. And Bravo didn't end up making it, but I have loved this book when I was working in publishing, and when I used to run a website called The Backlist, which was all about interviewing Black authors and Black publishing execs. I had interviewed Martha Southgate. So I had a sort of relationship with her. And so that was the first. And luckily enough, when that didn't sell, I told Martha, I was like, I really think this is a movie. Can I try to get this made as a movie? And she granted that blessing. And we were able to set it up at a production company. And so that book is still in play. It's still in play because of that. So for this one, Will Packer Media came to me about the project. Now, I remember the book being out, loving the book, and being like, it's too big. Also, though, connecting with Tia Williams, who's fantastic, and knowing of her work, but connecting with her agent and being like, I love the book. I just want you to know that, so dropping seeds in that way. And then Will Packer Media coming to me about adapting it. And then we went through the traditional pitch process, but they went and got the rights because that was a big book. You know what I mean? It was. That was a big book. So Will Packer Media and Kinetic got the rights to it. And then we pitched like 8 networks at the end of 2022. It was Pitch Palooza, just pitching. And then Amazon bought it. And yeah, but it was, romance is challenging to adapt. But this was a romance that I felt really first written by Honey, right? But really represent our ethos at Honey Chile, where it's like it just felt very real. It's like, here are 2 very damaged people who are in love with each other, who are trying to figure their shit out. And that felt very real to us. And we really wanted to be a part of that in that way. But again, romance is hard. So we really still had to make sure that we crafted something that made sense for TV. So yeah, that was how that came about.
And when you say you pitch 8 companies, do you tweak the pitch after each, meeting? How do you recalibrate that?
Yeah. Ivy and I were on every pitch. No, sometimes you may, but I stopped doing that, to be honest. I only tweak the pitch if we get questions that weren't answered in the pitch. I don't tweak them from tone. Sometimes it'd be like, well, for broadcast, you want it to be lighter. And I don't do that anymore. But I may tweak it if I'm like, okay, they asked this question. That was a good question. Let me actually just put it in the pitch. That would be the only tweaking. But for the most part, it stayed it was the same pitch.
I know you mentioned story and dialogue. Is there anything else that can make adapting IP a hit or miss?
Certain things just don't translate into TV or film. TV and film require engines, and books don't need to have that engine. Also, when I made the transition from being an author to a screenwriter, you can only write what you can see on the screen.
Yes.
Books can go all in your head, get all the emotions, tell you how they feeling, tell you what they thinking. You can't do that in a script because I can only write what I can see on the screen, right? So even that was an adjustment for me as a writer. And to this day, I get away with it a little bit on the page. Sometimes I push it a little too much, but I still will sometimes have some quote unquote like narrative aspects to my screenwriting from my book days. But that is a transition. So when you're reading a book and it's lovely, but it's all in their head, you got to figure out how to make that work visually. How are you going to make that work visually? How are you going to dramatize this? Those are things that I don't think we always think about.
I was going to say, I think that's why a lot of adaptations lean heavily on narration, because in a book, you could just explain what the person is feeling. And so they just rely on that in the film, and it drags it down. It doesn't necessarily translate.
That's a very tough piece. And so that's why when we're analyzing books, we're looking at that, like the actual adaptation of how this is going to work. How is this going to translate? Because people be like, this is a great idea. I'm like, yeah, but it's not a television show. It's a great book, but it's not a television show. And I don't know how to make this a television show. Somebody else may. I don't know how to make this a television show. Or, this is a great book. It's actually a film. You know what I mean? So it's not a television show. It's a film. So yeah, this making all those considerations for sure. So I would love to talk a little bit about where we find, I know, Dria, you mentioned like publishing newsletters and that sort of thing, but other ways that we kind of scour IP and how we track IP, a little bit about our sort of the logistics of it all.
Well, you mentioned also the UTA, the media rights list. So I would say this, all the major talent agencies have like a tracking list of some sort of books that are on their radar, books that they want to submit for television and film. So I will go through those lists, flag things that jump out, and then we see if the rights are available. That shopping agreement, those things like that.
We are always on the lookout for IP. And again, for us, it doesn't have to be new. And even for the business, what they're looking for is a proof of concept, essentially, right? They are always trying to minimize risk. So here's something that was published. Okay, somebody vetted it, right, is what they're thinking. Yes, a bonus is if it has a huge audience and huge social media and all that. But at the very minimum, this is a proof of concept. Somebody vetted this. I feel more comfortable with this. So it doesn't have to be new for us. Now we're looking for a couple of series, right, book series that might work for us. But we're always on the lookout because it's like an ongoing thing. I would love one day for Honey Child to have a book scout for sure, which would be amazing. But for right now, that's sort of we just keep our eyes and ears open. Publishers Marketplace has a great newsletter called Publishers Lunch, which is like where all the big announcements are. Publishers Weekly also making announcements. So we track announcements. We're also reaching out to agents and editors from my relationships from working in publishing and having conversations with them, letting them know what we're doing, send us manuscripts. So we're actually getting manuscripts at this point as well, which is quite amazing, again, given that we're an independent production company. I also just think it's important just to sort of respect for the author and the relationship building with the author is really, really important.
And we also kind of go through our own, what was popular back in the day, what series did people love, what things did we wish they would have got made if there was this appetite for Black stories like there is now. So we revisit old IP, like you said, Felicia, the classics and the underrated ones, the cult classics, and we see how we can breathe new life into them as well. And a lot of times if a book comes across my radar, I go and look and see what was the reception it had back in the day. Was this something that you remember, like Fly Girl? For me, everybody was reading Fly Girl.
Omar Tyree, right? And I feel like that book had so many people attached off and on throughout the years.
Yeah,
we should actually look up. Let's look up Fly Girl.
Listen,
who got it now?
We reach back and get it.
Who got the rights now? Yeah, so we're super excited about this class that's called Based On, and it's all about adapting IP. And we're going to go into much more detail about the nitty gritty around the different forms and of IP. And again, IP is intellectual property, just in case we didn't say that. And also getting into how we actually, broker these deals, all the jargon, all the need to know, all the pitfalls that we have recognized, and also just what it requires to adapt work. One thing that I realized is that Black authors' work gets optioned, right? Black authors get their work optioned. They don't get their work made as much as they should. And I think partly that's because folks don't take the care to develop in a way that makes it viable for TV or film. We want to be part of the solution to help position titles by Black people in a way that make them viable for film and TV. And so that's why a lot of books, great books, were snatched up and then nothing was done with them. And we want to come behind and scoop them back up and, position them the way that will make them viable for film and television. But I think it's a good time for us to get into our How We Create segment, is where we share all forms of inspiration that may have stopped us in our tracks, made us laugh, had us shouting, or even reminded us to rest.
So since we're talking about books, I recently read one called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, and it's based on the Bible verse, for as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. But it really just expands on the idea that your life is a result of the quality of your thoughts. So it's like whether you think your life is, you're eating sweet fruit right now or bitter fruit, it is a result of what you planted in the garden of your mind. So that book really just made me just think about the quality of my thought life, the thoughts I choose to dwell on. You know what I mean? Yes. Thoughts come to your head, but you have a choice about what you dwell on and what you expand on.
Listen.
And making sure that, your thoughts lead to your results. They lead to your actions, which lead to your results. So everything goes back to that seed that you plant in your mind.
I love that.
Mm-hmm. Well, to echo what your book, I just had to do a re-up on rereading The Secret. I had read it almost 20 years ago. I just need to be reminded of the power that lived within me. I'm like, Georgette, you can manifest these things that you want. And so it was helpful because I had to basically rewire the thinking, the perspectives, the narratives that I kept telling myself. So that's mine.
And I want to share or shout out Terry McMillan. I've been rereading Terry McMillan books. And, Terry McMillan now has a banner at Lifetime, and we love that because Black women watch Lifetime, and we want more Black women being represented at Lifetime for sure. So that's very exciting. But, just her bibliography is deep. And I know, of course, we know like The Waiting to Exhales, but you got The Mamas. You got just the other books that she has written that really show that she's writing about a certain type of Black woman for much longer than a lot of folks, and a Black woman of a certain age as well. So just shout out to Terry McMillan. Well, thank y'all for joining us for another episode of the Creative Cut Up podcast. We just love that y'all are showing us so much love. So please continue to tune in and meet us here again next week.
Yes, and if you have questions, drop them in the comments so we can answer them.
Thanks for listening to the Creative Cut Up podcast, a lively and honest space for storytellers that sits at the intersection of craft, business, and independence. Listen to us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you dig it, subscribe, rate, review, and please tell a friend. If you need help getting back into your creative practice, check out the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal. You can also join our newsletter and our We Create Daily community, both of which provide even more resources and opportunities to thrive creatively at thecreatedaily.com. And lastly, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at The Create Daily. Acting on your ideas is a form of self-love. And when I decided to write the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal, it was with you in mind. Storytellers with stories inside of you that you need to get out into the world. But life, fear, uncertainty has a way of leaving us stuck. But no more. It's time to reclaim our creative practice and get unstuck. The Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal can help you get back on creative track. 30 days of dynamic prompts, exercises to stimulate creativity, alongside motivational quotes, journal pages, and more. If you're ready to create again, get your copy of the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal today at creativecomeback.com. That's creativecomeback.com. Because it's never too late to become the artist you always wanted to be.